The first mistake Vanessa made was believing a copied key could open my workshop without opening something much bigger. At 2:17 in the morning, the sound of a lock turning pulled me out from under a 1969 Mustang like a gunshot in a church. Metal clicked. The side door eased open. Cold desert air slipped across the concrete floor, carrying the smell of wet asphalt, gasoline, and somebody's expensive perfume. I killed the work light and stayed beneath the car. Boot heels crossed my shop. Slow, careful, familiar. Whoever had come inside knew exactly where the cameras were, or thought they did. Through the narrow gap between the Mustang's frame and the floor, I saw white slacks, red heels, and the polished chrome edge of a key ring swinging beside one manicured hand. Vanessa Whitmore, president of the Willow Ridge HOA, real estate broker, self-appointed queen of every driveway, mailbox, and blade of grass within 3 miles. She moved through my workshop like she owned it. That part wasn't surprising. Vanessa had spent 2 years acting like ownership was something she could create by printing it on official letterhead. What surprised me was the car waiting outside. A black Dodge Challenger sat beyond the half-open door, its engine ticking as it cooled. No plates. A silver scrape ran along the passenger side, and the right headlight was cracked. I had seen those exact details 12 hours earlier on the local news. That Challenger had been stolen during an armed robbery outside Phoenix. My mouth went dry. Vanessa stopped beside my parts cabinet and pulled out a small flashlight. Its beam slid across shelves of carburetors, wiring harnesses, and engine control modules. Then it landed on the blue plastic case I had left there on purpose. She opened it. Inside sat a rare factory ECU worth nearly $4,000. She smiled. Not a nervous smile. A satisfied one. The kind people wear when they believe the trap belongs to someone else. What she didn't know was that the ECU had a tracker buried beneath the circuit board, a tamper sensor inside the casing, and a transmitter already feeding its location to an encrypted server. She lifted it carefully and slipped it into a leather tote bag. That was when I noticed the key in her other hand. Brass. Square cut. A tiny notch filed into the shoulder. My third workshop key. The one that had disappeared 6 weeks earlier during Vanessa's so-called safety inspection. I remembered her standing beside my workbench that afternoon, smiling through lipstick the color of dried blood while she lectured me about hazardous materials. I remembered turning away for less than 30 seconds. Long enough for her to press that key into wax. Long enough to make a copy. Back in the darkness, my fingers tightened around the wrench in my hand. Every part of me wanted to crawl out, block the door, and ask her why the president of a homeowners association was stealing parts for a car tied to an armed robbery. But my father had taught me something years before. When a machine makes the wrong noise, don't hit it. Listen, the noise will tell you where the damage is. So I stayed still. Vanessa closed the cabinet, wiped the handle with a silk scarf, and walked out. The Challenger rolled away without headlights. I waited until the sound disappeared behind the model home at the end of the development. Then I slid out from beneath the Mustang and checked my phone. The tracker was moving. Past the pool, past the sales office, past the landscaped wall behind Vanessa's perfect model home. Then the signal dropped 12 feet below ground. I stared at the screen while the fluorescent lights hummed above me. Vanessa thought she had stolen one piece of electronics from a tired mechanic. She had no idea that little blue box had just drawn a straight line from my workshop to whatever she was hiding beneath that house. Before this was over, that signal would land on an FBI agent's desk. My father used to say every key tells you something about the person who carries it. A clean key belongs to someone careful. A bent key belongs to someone impatient. And a copied key usually belongs to someone who knows they are opening a door they were never invited through. My name is Ethan Cole. I am 42 years old, and I restore classic American cars for a living. Before opening my own shop, I spent 8 years installing automotive security systems, GPS recovery units, and electronic ignition controls. But restoration was always the work I cared about. I did not flip cars. I did not polish them for rich collectors and pretend chrome was craftsmanship. I rebuilt them. Engines, frames, transmissions, wiring. The parts people never see but trust with their lives. The workshop behind my house had belonged to my father before it belonged to me. He built it in 1988 with second-hand steel, salvaged windows, and concrete mixed in a borrowed drum mixer that coughed black smoke all summer. The place still carried him, cutting oil in the floor cracks, Burn marks on the welding table. His old red toolbox with the second drawer that jammed unless you lifted it first. When I was 12, he taught me how to read engine numbers. At 14, I learned how to spot a welded VIN plate. By 16, I could tell the difference between honest restoration work and a stolen car wearing someone else's identity. Dad called that second kind butchery. Anyone can take a machine apart, he told me once. Character is what decides whether you put it back together or sell the pieces. After he died, I kept the workshop exactly as he left it, except for better lighting, modern security cameras, and a steel side door with a commercial deadbolt. There were only 3 keys to that door. One stayed on my belt. One sat in a fireproof safe beneath the office desk. The third hung from a magnetic key rack above the workbench. That was the key Vanessa copied. 6 weeks before she entered my shop at 2:17 in the morning, she arrived wearing a cream-colored suit and carrying a black HOA binder thick enough to stop a bullet. She claimed the board had received complaints about hazardous chemicals, commercial noise, and unauthorized vehicle storage. The complaint was anonymous. It carried no date, and it named no specific violation, just Vanessa's signature at the bottom. She stepped inside before I invited her. Her perfume hit first. Floral, sharp, expensive. It mixed with primer fumes and hot metal until the whole shop smelled like a funeral home built inside a machine plant. She dragged one red fingernail across my welding table. This kind of activity affects property values, she said. This kind of activity pays my mortgage, I answered. Her smile stayed in place, but the skin around her eyes tightened. She walked past the Mustang, inspected my shelves, and asked questions that did not sound like HOA questions. Which customers left vehicles overnight? Did I keep original titles on site? Were the cameras connected to the internet? Did the alarm call the police directly? I should have stopped her then. Instead, I turned toward the paint cabinet when she asked about ventilation. 30 seconds, maybe less. When I looked back, she stood beside the magnetic strip, closing her binder. The third key was still there. At least I thought it was. 2 days later, I noticed a thin red smear inside the key's groove. The same dark red as Vanessa's nails. I wiped it away and told myself it was paint. That was easier than admitting someone had pressed my key into wax and returned it before I turned around. Now, standing in my workshop before dawn, I opened the fireproof safe and counted. My belt key, the backup key, and the original third key still hanging where Vanessa had left it. She had not stolen my key. She had stolen its shape. That distinction mattered, because the copy in her hand was not just proof of trespassing. It was proof of preparation. Vanessa had planned to enter my workshop long before she stole that ECU. And I was starting to understand that my shop was not her first locked door. Vanessa did not inspect homes. She inventoried them. I realized that 3 days after she entered my workshop. The morning sun had barely cleared the roofs when I found a new violation notice taped to my garage door. The paper snapped in the dry wind, bright white against the steel. Unauthorized commercial activity. Below that, in smaller print, Vanessa had listed 6 vehicles currently inside my shop. A 1969 Mustang, a 1972 Chevelle, a 1987 Buick Grand National. 3 customer cars parked behind locked doors. She had written down their makes, colors, and estimated values. The metallic taste returned to my mouth. Those details were not visible from the street. I carried the notice inside, laid it beside my father's old toolbox, and read it again. Vanessa had not broken into my shop because she cared about noise. She had been collecting information. Once I started looking, the pattern became impossible to miss. Every month, the HOA mailed what Vanessa called compliance questionnaires. Residents were required to list long absences, emergency contacts, security alarm companies, and any vehicles stored inside detached garages. She claimed the information helped protect vacant properties. Most people filled out the forms without thinking. Retired couples listed vacation dates. Military families listed deployment schedules. Collectors reported classic cars to request parking exemptions. People handed Vanessa everything a thief would want, printed neatly in black ink. I pulled 2 years of HOA notices from a box in my office. I kept paperwork the way some men keep ammunition. Receipts, permits, inspection reports. Every letter Vanessa had ever sent me. The pages smelled like dust and toner as I spread them across the workbench. At first, it looked like ordinary suburban harassment. One resident fined for an unregistered Corvette. Another cited because a trailer blocked the view of his garage. A widow ordered to disclose why her dead husband's pickup had not moved in 6 months. Then I checked local theft reports. A silver Corvette disappeared 12 days after its owner received a vehicle verification notice. A restored Ford Bronco vanished while the family was in Hawaii. Their travel dates had been included in an HOA landscaping request. A contractor's work truck was stolen after Vanessa demanded photographs of the tools stored inside. Same neighborhood, same timing, same woman asking the questions. I drove to the home of a retired dentist named Harold Bennett. His blue 1967 Shelby had disappeared the previous winter. Harold opened the door wearing slippers and holding a mug that smelled like cinnamon coffee. When I showed him Vanessa's notice, his hand began to shake. She inspected the garage, he said. The words came out thin. 2 weeks before the car was taken. He disappeared into the house and returned with a folder. Inside was Vanessa's inspection checklist. Alarm location, garage door brand, vehicle serial number, spare key storage, all marked in her handwriting. At the bottom, beneath her signature, was a small red fingerprint. Nail polish, the same shade I had found inside my workshop key. By noon, I had spoken to 4 other residents. Every one of them had been questioned by Vanessa before losing a vehicle or expensive equipment. Every one of them had reported the theft to the same local police precinct. Every report had eventually been closed without an arrest. When I returned home, Vanessa was waiting beside my mailbox. White SUV idling, sunglasses covering half her face. She held another black binder against her chest. Your cooperation would make this easier, she said. For who? Her smile stiffened. For the community. Behind her, the model home stood at the end of the street, perfect windows reflecting the Arizona sun. Fresh flowers bordered the walkway. A brass sign near the entrance read, "Welcome home." Then I heard it, faint beneath the hum of sprinklers. An impact wrench, 3 sharp bursts, a pause, then the high mechanical scream of a grinder. The sound came from somewhere behind the model home. Vanessa heard it too. Her fingers tightened around the binder. Just for a second. Then she started talking louder. That was the moment everything changed. Vanessa was not using HOA rules to protect the neighborhood. She was using them to choose her next target. And my workshop had just made the top of her list. The blue case Vanessa took that night had not been left inside my workshop by accident. 24 hours earlier, I had prepared the one part one wanted her to steal. I did not confront Vanessa. That would have been the obvious move. Obvious moves are useful when you want someone to stop. I wanted her to continue. By sunset, I had turned my workshop into a controlled crime scene. Not a trap in the way people imagine traps. No wires across doorways. No electrified handles. Nothing illegal. Nothing that could hurt anyone. Just evidence. Clean. Quiet. Patient. I selected a rare factory engine control module from a 2018 Dodge Challenger. The casing was scratched, but the circuit board inside still worked. On the resale market, it was worth enough to tempt someone who knew stolen parts. I opened the housing beneath the white glare of my work lamp. The smell of solder rose into the air as I secured a commercial GPS tracker beneath the factory board. Then I added a small tamper switch and connected the unit to a cellular recovery service with automatic cloud backup. If anyone opened the case, I would know. If the signal moved, I would know. If someone tried to destroy the tracker, its last coordinates would already be saved. I brushed invisible ultraviolet dye along the handle and locking clips. The liquid dried clear. Anyone touching it would carry the evidence on their skin for days. My father's voice returned while I tightened the final screw. Never accuse a man of stealing a wrench when you can watch him walk away with it. I placed the ECU inside a blue plastic case and set it on the second shelf of the parts cabinet. Visible from the doorway. Easy to reach. Expensive enough to steal. Then I replaced the lock on my side door. That part mattered. Vanessa's copied key would no longer work. If she entered again, she would have to force the door, hire someone to open it, or fabricate authority convincing enough to make another person commit the crime for her. At 11:36 that night, my phone vibrated. Motion detected. The camera feed showed Vanessa standing outside the workshop in a dark tracksuit, twisting her copied key inside the new lock. Once, twice, then harder. Even through the camera microphone, I heard brass scraping against steel. Her shoulders stiffened. She looked toward my house, stepped back, and made a phone call. 7 minutes later, A white service van rolled into my driveway with its lights off. The logo on the side read Willow Ridge Community Maintenance. A man climbed out carrying a lockpick gun and a clipboard. Vanessa pointed at my door like she was directing a delivery. He hesitated. She handed him a document. Even from the camera angle, I recognized the HOA letterhead. Emergency Safety Inspection. Fabricated authority printed on expensive paper. The lock snapped open in 43 seconds. Vanessa entered first. She walked directly to the cabinet. No searching. No hesitation. That told me she had already seen the ECU during her earlier visits. She lifted the blue case, opened it just enough to confirm what was inside, and smiled. My phone chimed. Tamper sensor activated. She slid the case into her tote bag and wiped the cabinet handle with the same silk scarf she had used before. Then she left. I waited until the van disappeared. The tracking signal moved east through Willow Ridge, past the clubhouse, past the community pool, past the empty sales office. It stopped behind the model home. For 12 seconds, the blue dot remained still. Then it began moving again. Not north, not south, down. 3 feet, 7 feet, 12 feet below ground level. I stared at the screen while the workshop lights hummed above me. Public construction records showed no basement beneath that property. No underground garage. No storage level. Nothing. But my tracker was alive beneath Vanessa's model home, surrounded by rising heat and the faint electronic interference produced by heavy machinery. A new alert appeared. Temperature, 104 degrees. Then another. Sustained vibration detected. Somewhere under that perfect house, machines were running after midnight. I saved the coordinates, copied the footage, and uploaded everything to an encrypted folder. Vanessa thought she had stolen another valuable part. What she had actually taken was a witness, and she had carried it straight through the hidden door herself. The model home was supposed to be empty after 6. That was the point of a model home. Perfect furniture, fake fruit in ceramic bowls, towels folded like nobody had ever used them. A life designed to be admired and never lived in. But at 1:08 the next morning, heat still glowed beneath it. I parked 2 streets away and approached on foot. The desert air had gone cold, but the asphalt still held the day's warmth. Gravel crunched under my boots. Somewhere behind the houses, a sprinkler hissed in short mechanical bursts. The model home stood at the end of the development with every exterior light on. Welcome Home gleamed across the brass sign near the walkway. I stayed behind the landscaping wall and watched. At first, nothing moved. Then a panel in the rear fence slid sideways. Not swung. Slid. A black pickup rolled through the opening without headlights. The panel closed behind it and became part of the wall again. I checked the public site plan on my phone. No service entrance. No underground access. No reason for a truck to disappear behind decorative stone at 1 in the morning. I waited 7 minutes before moving closer. The smell reached me before the sound did. Fresh paint. Hot transmission fluid. Burned metal. Then came the whine of an angle grinder, high and sharp, followed by 3 bursts from an impact wrench. The same sounds I had heard while Vanessa stood beside my mailbox pretending not to notice. A narrow ventilation grill sat low in the retaining wall behind a row of artificial hedges. Warm air pushed through it. I crouched and aimed a thermal imaging attachment on my phone through the slats. The screen lit up orange. 1 vehicle, then another. A long workbench. 3 human figures moving around something shaped like a car frame. One of them leaned over the front rail while sparks sprayed across the floor, grinding off a VIN. My pulse beat once against my throat, then slowed. That was what happened when the truth finally became physical. Until that moment, I had evidence of theft. Now I had a chop shop. I recorded less than a minute of thermal footage, uploaded it automatically, and began backing away. I had no intention of entering the structure or confronting anyone. Then a security light snapped on. White glare flooded the service path. I froze behind the hedge. A door opened below ground level. Boots struck concrete. A man's voice said. She said he was getting suspicious. Another voice answered. Then clear his place out before Friday. I knew the second voice. Trevor Whitmore, Vanessa's son. He managed deliveries for the development and drove a lifted silver Ram with no company markings. I had seen him at HOA meetings, leaning against the back wall and smiling whenever his mother finds someone. Now he was talking about clearing out my workshop. The first man stepped into view. Broad shoulders, shaved head, gray work shirt, He carried the blue plastic ECU case. My case. Ultraviolet dye would already be on his hands. He tossed it onto the passenger seat of the pickup and turned toward the vent. For 1 second, I thought he had seen me. Then my phone vibrated. A small sound, barely louder than an insect. His head snapped toward the hedge. I moved before he could reach the wall. I stayed low, crossed the dry drainage ditch, and slipped between two unfinished houses. Behind me, the sliding panel opened. The pickup engine roared. Its headlights swept across framing lumber and bare concrete. I ducked through an open garage and pressed against a stack of drywall while the truck rolled past. Diesel fumes filled the space. My hand tightened around my phone. The recording had uploaded. The tracker coordinates were saved. The thermal footage existed in 3 places. They could catch me. They could smash the phone. They could burn the workshop to the ground. It would not matter. By the time I reached my truck, the blue ECU had moved again. This time it was headed north, toward an industrial strip outside town. Then the signal stopped beside a warehouse listed as a flooring distributor. I stared at the address. Miguel Santos had given me that same location 2 days earlier. It appeared in an old police report connected to 3 stolen vehicles. The case had been closed for lack of evidence. I called Miguel. He answered on the second ring. "You were right," I said. Silence. Then his voice dropped. "About the house." "About all of it." Another silence. Longer this time. When he spoke again, there was no surprise in his voice. Only exhaustion. "Ethan," he said, "you need to understand something before you call the local police." A garage door slammed somewhere behind him. "You are not the first person to find that place." The cold finally reached my skin. What happened to the others? Miguel breathed out slowly. They trusted the wrong badge. Miguel arrived at my workshop 20 minutes before sunrise. He came through the back door wearing faded jeans and a gray jacket with the collar turned up. No patrol uniform. No badge on his belt. Just a dented metal case tucked beneath one arm. He locked the door behind him and stood still for a moment, listening. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us. Outside, the first garbage truck of the morning groaned somewhere beyond the subdivision. "You followed?" I asked. "No," he said it too quickly. I looked through the security feed anyway. Empty driveway. Empty street. Vanessa's model home sat 3 blocks away, glowing in the darkness like a stage after the audience had gone home. Miguel placed the case on my welding table. Dust rose from the lid. "I worked auto theft for 11 years, he said. Before Vanessa became HOA president, before Trevor started managing construction deliveries, before half these houses existed." The latches opened with 2 dry clicks. Inside were old case files, printed photographs, license plate logs, and a black external hard drive wrapped in a plastic evidence bag. Some of the papers were yellow at the edges. Others carried red stamps. Closed. Insufficient evidence. Owner failed to cooperate. Miguel spread them across the table. The first photograph showed a white Corvette entering the Willow Ridge sales property at 2:43 a.m. The next showed the same car, leaving 5 hours later on a flatbed. No wheels. No doors. No front clip. Just a stripped shell under a gray tarp. "That was 4 years ago," Miguel said. "I traced 6 stolen vehicles to a construction company owned by one of Vanessa's cousins." "What happened?" "My lieutenant told me the cameras had the wrong timestamps." He slid another photograph toward me. Trevor stood beside a warehouse loading dock, talking to a uniformed officer. The officer held an envelope. I recognized him. Sergeant Paul Mercer. The same officer who had dismissed my burglary report as a civil matter. "The timestamps were correct," Miguel continued. "So were the plates. I checked them myself." He plugged the hard drive into my office computer. Folders filled the screen. Dates. Addresses. Vehicle identification numbers. Photographs taken from unmarked surveillance cars. One folder was labeled Whitmore. Inside were images of Vanessa meeting tow operators, salvage dealers, and officers from Mercer's precinct. She never touched a stolen vehicle in the photos. She did not have to. She provided access. Names. Schedules. Garage codes. The HOA gave her everything. Miguel opened a spreadsheet containing more than 80 residents. Each row listed a house number, vehicle type, estimated value, travel dates, and alarm details. My address sat near the bottom. Cole, Ethan. 1969 Mustang. Detached workshop. Owner works late. The final column contained one word. Pending. The workshop suddenly felt colder. You had this? I asked. Most of it. And you never went federal? His jaw tightened. I tried. Miguel opened another folder. Internal complaints. Emails to the State Auto Theft Task Force. A request for FBI review. Every message had been redirected to his chain of command. Then came the disciplinary reports. Unauthorized investigation. Failure to follow supervisory orders. Misuse of department resources. They buried the case, he said. Then they buried me with it. He had been suspended, reassigned, and finally forced into retirement. For months, I had wondered whether Miguel was helping Vanessa. Now I understood why he always watched the model home when we spoke. He was not protecting her. He was waiting for another chance. My computer chimed. The tracker inside the ECU had started moving. We watched the dot leave the warehouse and return toward Willow Ridge. It stopped beneath the model home. Miguel stared at the screen. You planted that. I let her steal it. For the first time since he entered, he smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the expression of a man hearing a lock finally release. I uploaded his files beside my camera footage, thermal recordings, and tracker logs. The evidence filled nearly 6 gigabytes. Too much for a local officer to misplace. Too detailed for a lieutenant to call coincidence. Miguel took an old business card from his wallet. The paper was soft from years of being carried. Special Agent Rebecca Sloan. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Phoenix Field Office. She contacted me after I was forced out, he said. 2 of the stolen vehicles had crossed state lines, and several forged titles had moved through federally insured banks. She told me to call when I had evidence collected outside department control. I looked at the blue tracker blinking beneath Vanessa's model home. Then my name marked pending on her list. Call her. Miguel did. Agent Sloan answered before the second ring. He gave her my address, described the tracker, and mentioned the hidden underground level. There was a pause. Then her voice came through the speaker. Do not contact local law enforcement, she said. Do not approach the property again. Headlights swept across my workshop windows. A white SUV slowed outside. Vanessa. She stopped at the curb and looked directly at the building. Agent Sloan was still speaking. We believe this operation is connected to an interstate vehicle theft and title fraud network, she said. Preserve everything. Do not alter the devices, and do not approach the property again. They may already know you are documenting them. Vanessa raised one hand and tapped 2 fingers against her sunglasses. A small salute. Then she drove away. She knew I had been watching. What she did not know was that the man beside me had spent 4 years saving every secret she thought the police had destroyed. And this time, the badge coming for her could not be bought. Vanessa had Trevor's maintenance crew cut the power to my workshop at 9:12 the next morning. They did not have authorization from the utility company. They opened the exterior service box and pulled the workshop disconnect themselves. 1 second the compressor was humming and sunlight was flashing across the Mustang's chrome. The next, everything died. Lights, cameras, alarm panel. Silence dropped over the room so fast I could hear hot metal ticking as it cooled. Then my phone vibrated. HOA Emergency Compliance Action. The message claimed my workshop posed an immediate electrical hazard and threatened daily fines, legal action, and an emergency injunction if I continued operating. Signed by Vanessa Whitmore. I almost laughed. An HOA could issue threats and file complaints. It could not disconnect private electrical service without authorization. The white truck leaving my driveway was not from the utility company. It belonged to the same maintenance contractor Vanessa had used to open my workshop door. Miguel stood beside my workbench, staring at the dead security monitor. She's cleaning the field, he said. She thinks the cameras are down. I opened the steel cabinet beneath my desk and checked the backup system. Battery power. Cellular connection. Independent cloud storage. Still recording. Vanessa had killed the lights, not the evidence. At 10:03, she arrived with Trevor and 2 men wearing Willow Ridge maintenance shirts. Vanessa carried a clipboard. Trevor carried bolt cutters. I met them in the driveway. You are prohibited from entering the workshop, she said. By who? The board. You are the board. Her smile sharpened. Then you understand how serious this is. She handed me a cease and desist notice threatening daily fines and an emergency court injunction. The document cited sections that did not exist and demanded immediate access to remove what it called hazardous materials. Evidence. Her word, not mine. What evidence? I asked. For half a second, her eyes flicked toward the side door. Then she corrected herself. Hazardous materials. Trevor stepped forward. I blocked him. Vanessa raised her phone. Move, Ethan, or I'll have you arrested. Call Mercer. Her expression changed. Just a twitch near the mouth. That was enough. She knew I knew. Instead of calling, she turned to the maintenance crew. Open it. The men hesitated. Trevor did not. He cut the temporary chain across the door and forced the lock with a pry bar. Metal screamed against metal. Vanessa entered first. I let her. Miguel looked at me like I had lost my mind. I showed him the live feed on my phone. The camera above the workbench was obvious. A black dome with a blinking red light. Vanessa saw it immediately. She climbed onto a stool, ripped it from the ceiling, and smashed it against the concrete. Plastic cracked. The lens rolled beneath the Mustang. She smiled toward me through the open doorway. Now we can talk privately. What she did not see was the pinhole camera inside my father's old wall clock, or the microphone buried in the ventilation grill, or the second camera disguised as a smoke detector. Trevor began opening cabinets. Vanessa went straight to the office. She pulled drawers out, dumped invoices onto the floor, and searched behind the computer. She's looking for storage drives, Miguel whispered. I kept filming. Trevor found the empty blue ECU case. Where's the tracker? Vanessa asked. Trevor froze. Miguel and I looked at each other. She knew about the device. Someone had found it. Trevor lowered his voice. Warehouse crew pulled the board. Nothing else was inside. Vanessa slammed the case onto the desk. Then he copied the data. She stepped closer to him. Her voice dropped, but the hidden microphone caught every word. We clear the lower level tonight. Every frame. Every title. Every plate. Mercer said federal people are asking questions. Trevor rubbed both hands across his face. What about Cole? Vanessa looked through the office window at me. We make him look unstable. The words landed softly. That made them worse. We report threats. Illegal surveillance. Maybe stolen parts in his shop. By the time anyone sorts it out, the house is empty. Trevor nodded toward the broken camera. And the recordings? Vanessa smiled. I just destroyed them. My phone vibrated again. Upload complete. 2 audio files. 3 video angles. Remote server confirmed. Vanessa walked out carrying my office computer. An HOA had no authority to seize private property. She knew that. This was no longer an inspection wrapped in bad paperwork. It was theft committed in daylight. That is my property, I said. It is evidence in an HOA investigation. No, I said. It's evidence in yours. Her smile vanished. For the first time since I met her, Vanessa looked uncertain. Then sirens sounded in the distance. 1 patrol car. Local. Mercer. Vanessa had already filed a report claiming I had threatened her, stalked her family, and hidden stolen vehicle parts inside my workshop. None of it was true. But Mercer now had a complaint he could pretend justified a detention. Vanessa relaxed immediately. She thought the right badge had arrived. I looked at Miguel. He checked his phone. Agent Sloan had sent 1 sentence. Let them take it. Federal agents were already positioned outside Willow Ridge. They wanted Vanessa and Mercer recorded removing property, destroying evidence, and acting together before the warrant team moved in. Mercer stepped from his cruiser and reached for his handcuffs. Vanessa pointed at me. There he is. I raised my hands. Not because she had won. Because every camera was still running. And Vanessa had just confessed to destroying a federal crime scene before the FBI had even entered the neighborhood. Mercer reached me first. His hand closed around my wrist before the cruiser door had finished swinging shut. You are being detained while we investigate allegations of harassment, unlawful surveillance, threats, and possession of suspected stolen property. Vanessa stood behind him with my office computer tucked beneath one arm. Calm again. Confident again. The model home smile had returned to her face. Trevor leaned against the maintenance van, watching me like the ending had already been written. Miguel said nothing. That was part of the plan. Mercer pulled my hands behind my back and tightened the cuffs until steel bit into bone. The morning air smelled like hot dust, cut grass, and the burnt plastic from the camera Vanessa had smashed. You should have stayed in your lane, she said. I looked at the computer in her arms. You should have left it plugged in. Her smile slipped. The hard drive inside that machine was almost empty. Every file had been mirrored remotely. Every word she said inside my office had already reached Agent Sloan. Mercer shoved me toward the cruiser. Then the first black SUV pulled away from its position 2 blocks down and turned onto our street. No lights. No siren. A second followed. Then a third. They had been staged outside the neighborhood before Mercer arrived. They moved slowly through Willow Ridge, dark windows reflecting identical houses and perfect lawns. Mercer stopped. Vanessa did not. "Private security," she said quickly. "For the open house event." The lead SUV rolled past us and stopped in front of the model home. Its doors opened at once. Men and women stepped out wearing body armor with yellow letters across their chests. FBI. The word seemed to change the temperature of the street. Mercer's grip loosened. Vanessa took one step backward. Special Agent Rebecca Sloan crossed the pavement toward us, her badge raised in one hand. "Sergeant Mercer, remove the handcuffs and step away from Mr. Cole." Mercer swallowed. "He is being detained during an active investigation. He is a cooperating federal witness," Sloan said. "Your detention is interfering with a federal operation. Step away." The cuffs came off. Blood rushed back into my hands and hot needles. Sloan turned to Vanessa. "Place the computer on the ground." Vanessa hugged it tighter. "This is HOA property collected during an emergency inspection." Sloan's expression did not move. "That computer belongs to Mr. Cole. Your removal of it was recorded." Trevor started toward the maintenance van. 2 agents intercepted him before he reached the door. Then came the warrant. Federal agents spread across the model home while residents stepped outside in robes, work clothes, and slippers. Vanessa kept talking. She called it a misunderstanding, a zoning dispute, a political attack. Her voice grew louder each time no one obeyed her. The brass welcome home sign gleamed beside her like a joke. Agents entered the spotless kitchen, passed the untouched dining table, and moved into the rear garage. The first search team found nothing. Vanessa smiled. Then I pointed toward the artificial hedge. There, an agent pulled aside the decorative panel. Behind it sat a steel control box disguised as irrigation equipment. The code on the keypad matched the last 4 digits of Vanessa's HOA office number. The wall slid open. Warm air rolled out carrying the smell of gasoline, fresh paint, and scorched metal. The agents descended first. We heard shouting below, then tools hitting concrete, then silence. Sloan allowed me to stand at the top of the ramp. I looked down into the space Vanessa had hidden beneath the perfect house. Car frames lined the walls. Doors hung from numbered racks. Engines sat on pallets beside stacks of license plates. A machine used to stamp VIN plates stood beneath fluorescent lights. On one table, agents found title documents, forged registrations, and printed HOA inspection forms. Residents' names were highlighted in yellow, travel dates in red, garage codes in blue. My name was circled twice. Near the back wall sat the stolen black Challenger. Its front end was already stripped. Beside it rested my blue ECU case. The man from the underground shop stood against the wall with ultraviolet dye glowing across both hands beneath an agent's lamp. Trevor was brought down the ramp. When he saw the evidence, his face emptied. Vanessa stayed above ground until Sloan opened a drawer inside the hidden office. She removed a ring of copied keys. Each one carried a small paper tag. House numbers, street names, resident initials. Mine read Cole, workshop. Vanessa stared at it. For the first time, she stopped talking. Then another agent emerged holding an envelope of cash marked with Mercer's badge number. Mercer looked toward his cruiser. He never reached it. Federal agents placed him in handcuffs 10 feet from where he had tried to arrest me. Vanessa whispered, "Trevor did this." Sloan held up the copied key. "Then explain why your access code opened the hidden ramp, why this key was recovered from your office, and why our recordings show you entering the lower level 3 times this week." The open house guests watched from the sidewalk as agents walked Vanessa past the welcome home sign. She had spent years using that house to sell people a perfect neighborhood. By noon, it was surrounded by federal evidence markers, and the hidden room behind her model home was no longer a secret. It was a crime scene. Vanessa's trial began 7 months later. By then, Willow Ridge looked different. Not physically. The lawns were still trimmed. The mailboxes still matched. The model home still stood at the end of the street, though plywood covered the garage and a federal seizure notice hung where the welcome home sign used to be. What changed was the silence. People stopped lowering their voices when they said Vanessa's name. They stopped checking the street before talking about the HOA. Fear leaves slowly, but once it starts moving, it does not like to come back. The federal indictment filled 3 pages and covered more than 40 stolen vehicles, several states, and millions of dollars in property, fraudulent insurance claims, and forged titles. Conspiracy, interstate transportation of stolen vehicles, wire fraud, insurance fraud, evidence tampering, identity falsification, possession of stolen property. Vanessa also faced state charges for burglary, unlawful entry, forgery, and theft. Mercer was charged with obstruction and accepting bribes. Trevor took a cooperation deal before the first hearing. That part did not surprise me. Men like Trevor mistake loyalty for protection until protection disappears. He gave prosecutors warehouse addresses, bank records, driver names, and the location of 2 more dismantling sites across state lines. He also explained Vanessa's system. The HOA forms were the beginning. She used inspection notices to learn what residents owned. Special assessments showed who had money. Vacation requests showed when homes would be empty. Noise complaints gave her legal-looking reasons to enter garages. Then Mercer buried the reports. It was not complicated. That was what made it work. People expect corruption to look like dark rooms and whispered threats. Sometimes it looks like a clipboard. I testified on the 4th day. Vanessa sat at the defense table wearing a navy suit and no jewelry. Her hair was shorter. Her face looked smaller without the sunglasses and practiced smile. The prosecutor showed me the copied workshop key sealed inside a clear evidence bag. Even through the plastic, I recognized the square cut and the tiny notch near the shoulder. "That key opened your workshop?" he asked. "The original did. And this one?" "This one opened the case." Vanessa looked at me then. Really looked. No smirk. No warning. Just the exhausted stare of someone who had finally reached a door she could not control. The jury saw the hidden camera footage. They heard her order Trevor to clear the lower level. They watched her destroy the decoy camera and carry away my computer. They saw ultraviolet dye glowing on the chop shop workers' hands, supporting the tracker records, surveillance footage, and physical evidence connecting them to the stolen ECU. They saw the spreadsheet listing residents, cars, travel dates, and alarm codes. Then Agent Sloan displayed the key ring recovered from the underground office. 37 copied keys. 37 homes. 37 chances for someone else to lose everything. The verdict came after 6 hours. Guilty on every major count. Vanessa was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Mercer received 9 years for obstruction, bribery, and his role in protecting the network. Trevor received 5 years after cooperating with prosecutors and helping recover vehicles and records from 2 additional locations. The HOA board was dissolved and placed under court supervision. A forensic audit uncovered hundreds of thousands of dollars in fake fees, shell contracts, and payments to towing companies connected to the theft network. Residents elected a new board. 3 teachers, a retired nurse, an accountant, and Miguel. He resisted at first. Then he said somebody had to make sure the rules were used for their actual purpose. My stolen parts came back in federal evidence crates. Some were scratched. Some were ruined. I did not care. The Mustang was still waiting. So was the Chevelle. So was the workshop. I replaced the side door with heavier steel and installed a lock Vanessa never would have understood. Not because it was complicated. Because it required permission. A month after sentencing, I mounted the copied key in a glass frame above my father's toolbox. Under it, I placed a small brass plate. Property of the wrong man. Customers ask about it sometimes. I tell them the truth. A woman copied my workshop key because she believed every locked door in Willow Ridge belonged to her. She used rules to collect targets. She used fear to keep people quiet. She used a model home to hide stolen cars beneath perfect furniture and fresh flowers. But she forgot something my father taught me before I was old enough to drive. A key does not decide who owns the door. Evidence does. Patience does. Truth does. Vanessa thought that copied key gave her access to my workshop. What it really gave the FBI was a path into her entire operation. Justice was not loud when it arrived. It sounded like brass turning once in the right lock. Then the door opened. And this time, Vanessa was the one who could not walk away.